I'd like to welcome in now Senior Fellow at Defense Priorities and host of Daniel Davis Deep Dive on YouTube, retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis. Lieutenant Colonel, always great to see you. We just heard from Robert there. The president is saying that he is, quote, not happy with the whole situation. From your perspective, is Putin in any way serious about finding a path to peace after this now largest air assault on Ukraine?
Yeah, he is 100% looking for peace, and they have been emphatic on saying this at every level, from Putin himself to his diplomatic corps, to his foreign ministers, that they say they do want to end this war through diplomacy and through diplomatic means, or they will achieve their goals on the battlefield. And that is the big crux of this, is that the conditions that they have for meeting this, which are very plain, very well known and repeated often, which is demilitarization, denazification as they view it, and the loss of certain territories. And those are huge issues for the West and certainly for Zelensky. But here's the unchanged problem. If you don't agree to those diplomatic terms Russia's offering, then the only thing left is the military outcome, where they will take all of it, or as much as that they want. And that's what I think that this increasing air power continues to show, in conjunction with what's going on the front lines as well, is that Russia is signaling with both their words and their actions that they mean this, and they will move to conquer Ukraine if that doesn't happen. And unfortunately, we still haven't come to grips with that. And I'm just telling you, this idea that we can bring some kind of sanctions now, well into the fourth year of this war, that will work when all the rest of them haven't, is all it's going to do is end up harming our side, and it will not stop Russia. That's the bottom line.
And we know that there are, meetings after meetings after meetings. European Union sanctions chief David O'Sullivan in Washington today, along with a team of EU experts, trying to discuss ways of ending this war. What do you think these European allies need to do to try to get some real movement in the right direction here?
Well, the problem is there a right direction, meaning one that can succeed, to be found? And I argue it's not. You had Scott Bessent yesterday on American television saying, look, we want to have this regime that can cripple the Russian economy and just break it and collapse it, I think was the word he used. That can't be done because of the failure of all the things that we've tried up to that point, in that Russia has made themselves nearly sanctions proof by finding alternative means for their product. And we see that blatantly in front of us with India. We've been trying to coerce and force India not to buy Russian oil. They said they're going to continue to do it even with the sanctions. And now that if you're talking about these secondary sanctions on China, India, Brazil, other countries like that, all that's going to end up doing is backfiring even more by pushing these folks more and more together to form an economic bloc that is impervious to our pressure, and will ultimately, in the long run, cost us economically as well when it comes to trade. So this is not a good path. It's not going to succeed, and it could harm us even more.
And along those lines, Lieutenant Colonel, a Kremlin spokesperson said just today that no sanctions would ever be able to force Russia to, quote, change the consistent position that our president has repeatedly spoken about. That is talking about Vladimir Putin. Trump, we know, has previously threatened harsher measures against Russia, but has not taken any action, when Putin ignored his deadlines and, prior threats of sanctions. I know you're skeptical, but do you think President Trump really does take some sort of action? What do you think that would look like in reality? And, I already know that you really don't think it would work anyway.
Well, and it's really not even a matter of my personal opinion. We have graphic evidence over more than 3.5 years of war to be able to validate that. And we do have the contours of it out there. Lindsey Graham, I guess back in July, he said, he had these whole bone-crushing sanctions that they had ready to go on, which featured primarily secondary sanctions on China, India, and Brazil. And if President Trump goes down that path and says, yes, we're going to try it anyway, almost the only thing that can happen is it can shove those folks further away from us and make them have cumulatively more efforts to minimize the interaction with the West. It's just not going to help. But that's the one thing that they can try to do. And I guess they think maybe there'll be a different outcome this time, but I just don't see it.
And Lieutenant Colonel, hindsight is always 20/20, and it may be that enough time has not passed at this point. But do you think that meeting a few weeks ago between Trump and Putin was a good idea?
I think it was a great idea. I cheered it on. I thought it's great. The fact that we're talking at the highest levels is a requirement to finding any kind of an end to this. And I thought it was really good. But it doesn't matter what you talk or anything else. It only matters what actions follow. And if we don't take the opportunity to find a realistic negotiated settlement, then the only thing that is going to be left is Russia with the military arm. And that's kind of where we're at right now. So there hasn't been any change from either before, during, or after that. And if we don't start, basically, we have to compromise on things we don't want to compromise on so that the Russians, from a position of power and a position of superiority, will concede to something else. And right now, we haven't been willing to do that.
And Putin is once again floating openness, to talks with Zelensky, but only if those meetings and those talks are held in Moscow. Do you think that is a good idea? Do you think that Putin is really open to those talks if they were to happen in Moscow?
Yeah, he absolutely is. But Zelensky, who on ABC News yesterday just mocked that and said, no, he can come to Kiev. I'm not going there, which I think was the expected answer. No one should be surprised by that. But that underscores the reality. What Putin said there is basically a reiteration of what he said previously, is that we'll accomplish our objectives, negotiated settlement, meaning he coming to Kiev effectively to surrender. Let's call it what it is. That's what it would be if he went and did that. And if he doesn't come to Moscow, then there won't be a meeting anywhere, because Putin certainly isn't going to go to Kiev under any circumstances. And then he'll just continue on with his methodical military march. That's where we are.
All right, so no bilateral meeting as of yet. Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, thank you as always.
Always my pleasure.